All right, church, grab your Bibles, Exodus chapter 4 today, where we keep going verse by verse through this book. And also grab your series guides. I know it's been like a month since we launched those, so if you have them, grab them. If you're new and you don't know what that is, basically, anytime we go through a book of the Bible, we want to help you study and read God's Word on your own, right? You don't need a high priest up here telling you what the word says for you to connect to God. You can connect to God yourself. Your high priest is Jesus, and we want to help you build that ability to actually understand the Bible. And so that series guide walks you through week by week what the passage is, and then you come here and hear it preached and take notes, and then we go to gospel community and apply that. Because listen, the single greatest factor in your growth with God is you getting in his word on your own. That's it. Like, meeting with him is the number one thing. So we want to help you do that. And listen, if you're like, man, I don't know how to read the Bible, I don't know where to begin, then GC is a great chance to raise your hand and go, I need help. And people will come right around you and take time aside to help you learn how to do that. Okay, well, speaking of help, do you ever find yourself purposefully avoiding something you know you're supposed to be doing? You ever done this or do this? Maybe it's working out, obviously. Maybe it's eating more healthy. Maybe it's making a hard phone call or setting a hard boundary or starting a hard home project, right? That's been on that to-do list for like a couple presidencies, you know? Dusting the top of the fans, you know, something like that. Anybody actually do that, by the way? Okay, a few tall people, that's cool. Yeah. Whatever it is, if you're a human, you've probably come up with some pretty clever internal arguments on why you should not do it. You know, the self-talk that I'm talking about, right? Like, I really shouldn't. I really can't. Well, if I did, look at all the bad stuff that would happen. It's almost like an actual conversation with yourself, where our internal lawyer springs into action, and that lawyer is good, right? Like really good. Like we're really good at objections, are we not? At explanations, excuses. Well, early in my 20s, I want to confess something today. I had a bad habit. Really, in my early 20s, I had a bad habit. Imagine that. Now, it wasn't my bowl of huge Brahms ice cream every night. That also was there. But my bad habit was hitting the snooze. I had such a hard time getting up in the morning, okay? That was a less disciplined version of myself. And it was pretty bad. You go, how bad was it? I mean, don't you just do the tricks that everyone else does? Get the things that light up. Open the shades. You need that sunlight. Set that circadian rhythm, Tyler. Well, I did. Well, make it warmer in your house, right? Reward yourself, punish yourself. Well, I did. Okay, find a really annoying noise on your alarm. I did. How about a soothing noise? The waves or the trickling stream or the crickets or they're just not a soothing noise, by the way, right? Like, I don't know who got that one in, but they should be fired. That's not a soothing noise. Well, I did those things, and they didn't work. I'll put the alarm across the room. That's what you do. Listen, I did, and I would zombie walk across the room and then come back and climb back in my bed several times, right? And I used the word climb there on purpose because I had a loft bed that didn't have a ladder. I know, this is bad, okay? I needed help, and yet I still did it. And my glazed over mind in the morning would come up with all the reasons in the world why I should go back to sleep, right? Why I deserved to go back to sleep. Why it was a crime if I didn't go back to sleep. I simply could not get up. Got so bad that eventually I would hang like an acrobat off my loft beds. Okay, this is a rickety old, this is the bed that I had as a kid, and it needed cinder blocks to hold it in place, okay? And there I was. I would flail myself down with one hand on the bedpost, a back bend like Spider-Man like this, with one foot on the bed, all the way down to hit that snooze before I ninja warriored my way back up into the bed so I could sleep 8 more minutes. The extremes we sometimes go to in order to avoid doing what is good. Right? I literally bent over backwards, and today Moses is going to do the same. And in his failure, I think we will find immense encouragement for ourselves. So here we go, Exodus 4. We pick things up mid-convo. Remember last week, God supernaturally appeared in a burning bush, and he shared his purpose to rescue Israel and his plan to use Moses to do it. And Moses, his natural response, right, the initial shock, he says, "Who am I?" He objects. And God says, "But I will be with you." And Moses then asks for more, right? Who exactly are you, God? If the Israelites ask, what do I tell them? Which frames God's famous answer. I am who I am. I am Yahweh. That's who will be with you. And God goes on to give details, right? And he personally reassures Moses of the successful outcome, which should be enough, right? This is God, after all, right? Fiery flames, bush that's not burning, holy ground, revealing his name, pledging his presence, and certifying as he calls his shot of what he's going to do in the future down to the details. This conversation, it should be over at this point. Mic drop. We should not have a chapter 4, but I'm so thankful we do. Here we go, verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" Okay, this is his third objection now in the conversation. Objection number 3, "I won't be believed. Israel won't listen to me. They're going to say you're lying, you're crazy." He's running those hypothetical scenarios, like we all do this, right? Anticipating kind of how people will respond in the future. You kind of play the game so much so that you come up with like a certainty in your mind of what's going to happen in this future reality. And then you get worked up anxiously about it. And that's what Moses is doing. And he's got some tunnel vision going on. Now, to be fair, it does seem like an understandable concern. Moses has been MIA for 40 years. Here he is as a fugitive showing back up. Hey guys, talked with a bush. Right? I mean, it's burning, but didn't burn up. I mean, it was God. It was God. He said, he's here, he's seen you, and he's going to deliver us. Like those chains of slavery, no more. Right? God, they're going to think I'm a lunatic. My reputation isn't great as it is. I mean, they probably already view me as a traitor, a sellout to Egypt, a palace boy who hasn't spent a day in slavery in his life. I mean, they didn't trust me the last time I helped. Do you hear the self-talk? It's all pretty reasonable. Now, there could even be some kernels of humility in what he's saying. When he says they won't listen to my voice, maybe he's implying, oh, but God, they would listen to yours. Hint, hint. Maybe you could just directly tell them yourself the whole fiery bush thing again. It would be great. It kind of worked on me. Maybe. But I think his objection is a lot less humble and a lot more belligerent. Why? Well, number one, because he's not expressing his concern in the form of a question, right? This isn't, hey, God, what if this happens? How would you help me? What do I do? No, he's not even saying it as a suggestion. He's asserting it as a statement. Like, this is what's going to happen. It's a fact. This is, let's say it this way, not a genuine request for help, okay? It's a cynical, panicky complaint. You ever made those? But number two, God has already said that they will listen to you. Look back at chapter 3, verse 18. And they will listen to your voice. Like just seconds later now, Moses is saying the direct opposite. It's a clear lack of faith and direct doubt in the words God just spoke. Now, he may not overtly be saying, God, you're wrong, but that's the essence of it, okay? They won't believe me equals I don't believe you. You tracking with that? Like, our self-doubt is really about doubting God. Now, look at God's answer here, verse 2. The Lord said to him, hey, what's that in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. Hey, me too, Moses, not a snake guy, right? I don't know about you. Some of you people, you snake handlers, you like snakes, and you want to protect snakes, and you want snakes as a pet, right? Like, let them slither around on me. Oh, it's so fun. Like, no, not me. I'm out, okay? I'm on team Moses right here. I'm running with him. But the Lord, verse 4, says to Moses, okay, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. Yikes. So he puts out his hand, and he catches it. It becomes a staff in his hand. Okay, what's God doing here besides playing fear factor? Well, for starters, he's giving Moses baby steps of faith. Do you see this? Like, to get him out of the overwhelmed, frantic state, worrying about the future, he has him focus on something concrete right in front of him. This is amazing leadership and counseling from the Lord. Hey, don't worry about the down-the-line dominoes, steps D, E, F, G, H. Moses, we're just going to focus on A. Can you do A? Can you throw the staff down? It's a micro moment. Moses, if you will be obedient in the simple little things, I will show you my power. I'm not asking you to do it all at once, just one step at a time, and I will take it from there. I love this. He redirects his focus off the future and off himself and onto the Lord. And in doing so, he builds his confidence, right? Like, you could just see, like, Moses' puny little faithometer, like, just kind of like do some of this. Okay, but why the snake? Like, what's this sign showing? Here's what it's showing. God has clear authority. Like, he can take what's deadly and intimidating, and he can make it submit to the man of obedient faith. It's no accident it's a snake. I mean, yes, we have the connection to Genesis 3 and Satan being the serpent, but there's more. Pharaoh himself took on this symbol. His headdress was a, cobra. This was the national god of Lower Egypt, a snake. And so what God is showing here, it's not a random trick. It's a demonstration of his authority over Egypt and evil. I will rescue them from their deadly oppressors. And catch this, it won't be with a sword in Moses' hand or a scepter in Moses' hand, but what? A staff. I love that. That's God's way, humble, lowly leadership of a shepherd. Okay, so this faith-building exercise isn't just for Moses' confidence, though it's a practical answer to his objection. Look at verse 5. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, Jacob, has appeared to you, okay? This is a sign to validate you, Moses, so they will know you are sent not with your own power and authority, but from me. All right, verse 6, God's got an encore act. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Yikes. Okay, can you imagine the seconds between verse 6 and verse 7? Like, freaking out. Verse 7, then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he did, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. This is God's power to heal. Moses, I'm going to take your ordinary hand and I'm going to use it as the instrument in my mighty hand to rescue Israel, who, like your leprous hand, is rotting away in slavery. I'm going to heal them. I'm going to restore them. And notice the personal touch to it, right? Like Moses' own hand is involved. And so I think this is subtly communicating, hey, I'm going to transform you, Moses, in the process. Here's a truth principle for us today. Listen to this. In our obedience, serving, and ministry to other people, we in the process actually receive God's transforming grace ourselves that heals, makes whole, that restores our own identity in him. In other words, our growing is tied to our going, right? Okay, so 2 signs so far. And during these signs, I kind of envision, if you will, with me, like the hand of a father, like over his son, with the power saw, like helping him make his first cut, right? The master crafter, like showing him how it's done, like letting him feel the power through him. I feel like that's a little bit of what the Lord is doing Okay, now in case those don't work, here's a third ace in your repertoire, verse 8. Now, if they won't believe you, God said, or if they won't listen to the first sign, they may believe the second. If they won't believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile, pour it on the dry ground, and the water you shall take will become blood on the dry ground. This points to the plagues that are to come, right? Okay, so 3 signs, 3 realms God has authority over. First, creatures and animals with the snake. Second, humanity with the body. And third, nature with the water. Interesting. And at the same time, notice, these are 3 realms in which God intends to redeem. These are the very 3 realms, and I think they represent all the reasons that you and I suffer and have problems. Reason number 1 is sin against us. That's what the snake represents, and Pharaoh and evil and Satan kind of driving things behind us. These are the spiritual enemies of God. But number 2, with Moses' hand, is like our own sin, right? Like we need rescue from ourselves, man. And then 3, with the water, represents the broken, fallen world where there's disease and disasters and death, and all of nature is fractured. And God is saying here, he's previewing, I redeem all 3, right? I want you to see just how patient God is in this whole response, right? Like he doesn't shut Moses down for contradicting him. Moses, are you calling me a liar? He doesn't blast him with a strong rebuke. He graciously helps build his faith, almost as if to say, okay, well, let's entertain your scenario here. Let's say they don't listen to you. Here's what we'll do, big guy. He makes provisions for him in his fears. Even though he knows those fears are totally unfounded and full of doubt, God doesn't get offended, and he doesn't throw down in wrath. He stoops to listen and moves towards him in his weakness and panicky complaints, and gives him actually practical help. This is stunning from our God. So compassionate, so gracious. And you go, great, Moses is surely going to get it now, right? Like he's got actual real firepower in these tricks to back him up. I mean, surely this is the death of his doubt, right? Right? Verse 10. But Moses, there's that phrase again, said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you've spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue. God, I can't talk well, right? Not a great speaker. Communication's not my specialty. You want someone to tend sheep, fight off wolves? I'm your guy. Need somebody to protect damsels in distress? Well, I've been known to wield a nunchuck or two, right? Need some deep thinking, strategic engineering, wilderness wild man who knows survival skills? I am your guy, God. But speaking? Articulating words? Not my thing. It never has been. And notice what he says here. Hasn't changed in the last 10 minutes, God. Throws a little jab in there. Now, slow of speech and tongue could mean a couple of things. Number 1, it could mean an actual speech impediment. Or 2, it could mean just like an issue with language and translation. I mean, it's been 40 years since he's been in Egypt, since he's been around Hebrews. It might be a little clunky. His fluency might be tripping him up, and so he might stumble over his words. Or 3, it could just mean, he's not a natural public speaker. He's not a fast thinker. His thoughts get all jumbled and they come out as unclear, especially after 40 years of nomadic shepherding, right? When you talk about an introvert's dream, that's Moses' job. I don't know whatever the exact nature, but at the end of the day, he is saying, God, I hate to break it to you, but I ain't a good talker. I'm going to go ahead and self-select out on this mission and disqualify myself from the interview. I'm insufficient and I'm inadequate. What is God's answer to this? Oh, it's a doozy. Look at 11. The Lord said to him, who's made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Good comeback. Who created the mouth? Right? Who made your voice and makes people hear? Oh, that's right, Moses, it's me, right? And what's he saying? He's saying, hey, Moses, the one who made your mouth, don't you think I know that you have this problem? And what's the implication? If I fashioned that in you and know that already, don't you think I got this? No matter how weak and inadequate you are, your deficiencies and your insufficiencies are irrelevant because anything plus Yahweh equals enough. You got 5, he's got 95. You got -5, he's got 105. You plus Yahweh equals enough. Amen. God's saying, my adequacy will overcome your inadequacy. I love that. Notice what he's doing. Moses, stop focusing on yourself. Focus on me. This isn't about who you're not. It's about who I am. And so he says, verse 12, now therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Okay, here's our first hint of God's patience being pushed a little bit. No miracles or big revelations this time, just a rhetorical question pointing back to himself as the creator. And then this command again, go now. Like, come on, bro. Enough of the excuses. Like, let's get to it, Moses. And then he repeats his reassurance. I will be with you. I'll teach you what to say. And notice he says, I'm going to be with you in the exact area of your weakness, in your mouth. How cool is that, right? We saw this astounding truth last week, didn't we? That God's ultimate answer to human objections is simple. I'm with you, right? That's what he promised to Abraham. That's what he doubled down to Isaac. That's what he spoke over Jacob and he passed down to Joseph. It's what he says to Joshua on the edge of the scary promised land. And it's what he gives scared Gideon that turns him into a mighty warrior. It's what he utters through Isaiah and heralds through Haggai and repeats to Jeremiah. This is the difference in David defeating Goliath, right? It's the difference in Daniel in the den of the lions. It's the difference when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing in the flames. Oh yeah, there's another one with them in that fire, right? This is the difference in Ruth's redemption, and in Esther's prevention, and in Nehemiah's intervention. And on we go until the day of Jesus' ascension, when he assures his frightened followers on that mountain, hey, I know that you're going to step into the valley of the shadow of death as you go plant my church, but you can fear no evil because I am with you. Always, to the end of the age. Though I'm sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves, do not fear, because the lion is by your side. This is his answer. It's his only answer to human weakness. I will be with you. Where you're insufficient, I'm sufficient. Where you lack, I lack nothing. Where you are not, I am. And I am is I am with you. And so go forward, because I'm going with you. I want you to picture for a moment being in a really frightening environment, okay? Something that would put you on pins and needles. Maybe it's a dark alley late at night. Maybe it's a tent in a grizzly-infested forest. Maybe it's Sunday afternoon at Costco. Anybody? That checkout line can get pretty rough, okay? Maybe you're on the edge of a rock face or the edge of an airplane about to skydive. Whatever sends your heart rate through the roof. Maybe even right now, cortisol is pumping. Like, okay, Tyler, can we get on with this? Okay. Now, Picture that dark alley, that threatening forest, that edge of a cliff. And now I want you to do something. I want you to picture this guy with you. Okay? Yeah, that guy. Man, what does that do to you immediately? The guy who claps with one hand. Who makes onions cry and kills 2 stones with 1 bird. Okay, how would the presence of this highly trained, lethally competent, fill in all the adjectives, you know what kind of dude standing right there with you do? It's kind of like, we can take that down. It's kind of like a little kid, that moment he jumps or she jumps off the diving board, right, for the first time, the high dive, and there's mom or dad ready to catch them. Just such a security. It's game changing. It's the X factor. I'm with you. Well, surely this answer will silence Moses and make him ready now, right? Verse 13, but he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." I don't think this is the 413 that everyone writes on their football helmets and basketball shoes. Okay. This is like the anti-Philippians 413, right? God, I decline the offer. Pick someone else. Oh, I wish I could, God, but I just don't want to. Right? Okay, at this point, we've now progressed to the epicenter of Moses' objections, past the surface level mixture of humility and doubt, through the mantle of his insecurities and weakness, now to the molten core of his fear and flat-out lack of a desire. Objection number 5, I don't want to. I'm unwilling. Okay, but why? Like, at this point, what's still holding our boy back? Okay, a couple of things. Now, this is speculation, all right? But some of them kind of come from the story. Here's some options. Number 1, fear of facing his painful past, okay? I want you to think about these for you as we go through them. Like, he's got to deal with his old failures, his old sin, his old crimes, his old trauma, right? His old family, those old relationships, and just going back to all that, the palace, the memories, it might be just too difficult. I'd rather stay avoiding my past and wounds rather than face them. Number 2, fear of failure and rejection. Like, this mission is monumentally big and hard. And I failed in the past, God. I imagine that's on the front of his mind, right? I don't want the sting of rejection and failure again. Number 3, fear of conflict and harm. Listen, facing Pharaoh is intimidating and dangerous. The most powerful man in the world, in which Moses is a fugitive from. This could be a fear of conflict or death, even. 4, fear of disrupting his peaceful life and his plan. You know, I like the life I've built now, me, Zipporah, the kids. Sheep aren't all that bad. I got a good relationship with my in-laws, lots of alone time just out in God's country. Right? What's going to happen to my life and to my family if I do this? It's a disruption to my plan. And number 5, fear of discomfort. I mean, he's already said speaking, leading a nation is way outside of his comfort zone. But what about also the fact of, long travel, leaving home, people angry with me? My age, God, this is very uncomfortable. This sounds hard, God, too hard. I think if we could boil all of them down to a simple synopsis, it would be this: I want to avoid what's hard. God, I want easy, and this is really hard. I don't want to do it. One commentator put it this way: 40 years of inertia wins. Right? Verse 14, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he'll be cloud in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be like God to him. And take in your hand the staff with which you shall do the signs." God's patience has been pushed and pushed. We're on the fifth objection now. And the one who is so slow to anger, who's been so patient, now has anger. And with God, it's always righteous anger. It's never a sinful form that's rash or inappropriate or that responds incorrectly. It's always rightly measured. And I think, obviously, part of his anger here is towards Moses' outright refusal to obey, right? All of God's patience and his abundant answers, I've empowered you, and yet still he's refusing and he's doubting. Like, that does not please God. Moses, in all his honest pushback and his raw objections, has now gone a step too far. And God, like a loving parent in firmness, eventually has to draw the line and say, no more. This is not okay. I love you too much to let you persist on this path. Imagine that's part of it. But imagine there's a second part. And it's at Moses' refusal to think about the people in Egypt who needed rescue. The people are getting abused, bro. Exploited. Serious oppression and suffering is happening, and rather than being stirred with the same compassion of God, like that passion that is moving the Lord to intervene, Moses doesn't even seem to care enough to do something about it. He seems, let's be honest, absorbed in himself. Moses, where's your love, man? That fiery, protective, righteously angry love that you used to possess, Moses, 40 years ago. What happened to it? Did you stop caring? My guess is he did. Like, over 40 years, well, look what happened last time I cared. It got me into this mess. And over the decades, his zeal subdues and goes dormant. And God right here wants to wake it back up. Now, I love the Lord's kindness in his response, because despite how obstinate and selfish Moses is, and even with that righteous anger, God doesn't consume him in his holy flame, does he? No. He doesn't cast him off or scold him. He actually still answers him quite patiently with astounding grace. 4 things he gives Moses in this last answer. 1, practical provision. Hey, Moses, here's your older brother Aaron. He can speak well. You can't speak well, Moses? I got you covered. You want me to send someone else? Okay, deal. And guess what? He's already on his way. Did you catch that? I love this. Oh my gosh. Just so happens, right, after this many years that old Aaron gets something stirring inside him to trek out hundreds of miles into the random wilderness to find his long-lost brother. What could have moved him? If this is chess, God moves and moves ahead. Listen, church, mark this down. God's already answering the questions that you haven't even asked yet. He has plans for your problems that are already in motion. He's supplying you with grace before you ever even know you need it. How astounding is that? And you go, well, how does all that work, man? Like, did God know that Moses was going to object? Well, of course he did. He knows all things. Okay, well then, like, was that even a real dialogue then? A true conversation with real back and forth? Like, is Moses just a robot? No. What we have here is the amazing interplay of God's sovereignty with real human choices. Like, Aaron is both seen as something that's triggered by Moses' human weakness, and yet at the same time something God divinely already planned, right? And those two are being held together in a wonderful tension. Like, Aaron's not plan B. God's not scrambling his fighter jets to react to this. God's providence is working in real time with real human interaction. It's beautiful. Now, God adds another nugget in this too. Did you see this? He says, when he sees you, he'll be glad in your heart. You see what God's doing there? That whole fear of your past thing and unsure of how this reunion will go. Hey, let me put that to rest for you, Moses. I got you covered. He'll be happy to see you. Like, God didn't have to say that, man. That's just so over the top kind. So he gives him practical provision. Number 2, he gives him a plan. You're going to use Aaron as your official spokesman, like a translator. I'll give you the words. He can speak for you. He'll be your mouthpiece, your right-hand wingman, right? Every biblical Batman needs a Robin, okay? And that's going to be Aaron. Now, notice he says he's going alongside you, but he's not going instead of you, okay? Moses, he's your support, not your substitute. You're not getting out of it, Moses, right? I love this. I'm still sending you. Number 3, he gives him, again, his presence, that central promise. I will be with both of your mouths. I love this because it's reminding us the mission is not dependent on someone being eloquent, okay? Aaron's not saving the day with his great oratory skills. No, actually, molasses mouth Moses is still the primary dude, right? Like, he's still the main guy here. Success is dependent only on the great I am. Because it's not important which of these guys speaks well. It's only important what they're saying. It's God's words, right? And last, 4th, he gives him his power. Hey, for those signs we talked about earlier, don't forget your staff, Gandalf, right? Like, remember that. Okay, so he gives him those 4 things. Now, this is the end of the argument. No more back and forth, okay? 5 objections, 5 gracious, sufficient answers. Let's rehearse them. Number 1, who am I that I should go? I'll be with you. What's your name? I am who I am. I'm Yahweh. I won't be believed. Use these signs. I can't talk well. I'll give you the words. Send someone else. Here's Aaron to support you. I'll be with you both. God has checkmated his man in the most gracious, providing, empowering way, so that there's really no longer a reasonable or even unreasonable excuse Moses can level. Now, next week we'll see the first verse, Moses obeys, okay? And the next 40 years, the book will show us this. Like, Moses finishes well. It's full of steadfast faithfulness in serving the Lord. His final third of his life is a good final third. Despite the doubt we see here, the excuses, him squirming to dodge the draft, no, eventually he accepts God's mission with humble servants, and he's used mightily for decades. But not today. Not today. He's not the model of faith today, and I'm so thankful for the self-implicating honesty we get from the Bible. Remember, Moses is writing this, right? He could have omitted this, but he doesn't leave it out. He exposes himself willingly, records it for the whole, history to see. His failure so that you and I would be encouraged today. I mean, don't you struggle sometimes with faith and doubt like Moses? Haven't you and I ever asked these same questions? Aren't we plagued with excuses and objections and procrastinating obedience? Don't you and I feel insufficient and afraid or just flat out unwilling at times? Yes, 100%. What encouragement. As you and I clearly sometimes avoid, just like Moses, doing what we should do, what he's called us to do. We struggle to accept his mission and believe his power and receive his help and trust his presence. And like him, we're just focused on ourselves. When we go, I shouldn't, I can't, I won't. How good is our God to patiently answer us, right? With his word to reassure us and give clarity. With helpers to come alongside us. With detailed plans sometimes, or at least the big picture. Sometimes even signs to validate and confirm. But ultimately, though, his central answer, his presence. I am with you. That's the answer. It's the answer to every doubt, every inadequacy, and every fear. Here's the main point today. God answers every insufficient objection in us with his sufficient presence with us. Church, isn't this the heart of the gospel? Think about it for a moment. Our insufficiency to save ourselves. Like we are Israel back in Egypt, enslaved to our sin. We could not rescue ourselves. We needed one to be sent, and he was the one who had no objections to the Father's will. The one who willingly, in his fierce, protective, righteous love, came running to intervene. I will be with you became I am with you when Jesus came. Our good shepherd, who has authority over humanity to heal and restore, authority over nature to create and subdue, and authority over evil to rescue and redeem. And listen, he attached himself to a different type of wood, but for the same purpose, so that wood would be transformed in his power to crush the serpents. That's what he did. Because in Jesus, our insufficiency meets his sufficiency, right? Our 0 plus the cross equals enough. Have you ever brought your sin and weakness to Jesus before? Or maybe you're in here today and you actually have never done this step of surrender to him. Maybe you're still resisting, objecting, doubting. Like Moses, you're avoiding and squirming. You're putting up arguments and objecting. And the Lord today, in his mercy and grace, is tapping right on your heart going, it's time. No more. I have good things ahead of you. I have mercy and grace to meet you, not condemnation. I'm going to save you into a new life filled with purpose for my name. Oh, do not push back any longer. He's offering something so much better. Church, if you're a believer in Jesus today, then I think we end with a few charges for us. Number one, it's clear, his call. You are sent. You hear us say that every week, and this passage is being so clear. Okay, where has God sent you? Where has he called you? But you do realize God has a life of purpose for you, right? When he saved you from sin's slavery and saved you to himself forever in heaven and saved you into God's church, his family, he did not save you so that you could veg out for the rest of your life on earth doing nothing, right? No, Exodus 3 and 4 shows us clearly that to be saved is to be sent, man. The same conversation Moses encounters God in, he's being sent by God in. That's the same for Paul. That's the same for the disciples. Like, that is it, man. We get a new identity, then we get a new activity, y'all. Thank God. Like, think about this. You do not have a life of boredom, y'all. You have been saved to a life on mission. Thank the Lord. You have a role to play in his kingdom, just like Pua and Shiphrah, Amram and Jochebed, Princess Bathia, just like Miriam and Aaron, Jethro and Zipporah. Doesn't matter how ordinary or unlikely you are, God has a significant role. Because his mission, this is just like Moses, and your mission are bound together, okay? How awesome is that? You've been sent to proclaim the name of the Lord, to show people who he is and what he is like in your everyday life. Treasure Jesus. Help others treasure him too. Like, even the most bland and mundane minutes are now infused with purpose, y'all. Like, this is phenomenal news. And so let's think about this in two realms. Number one, like, what has God clearly called you to at a general big picture level? This is important to start with. Like, your primary relationships. He's called you to discipleship in your home, with your family members, right? In our church body. Your work is meant to be done in glorifying ways to the Lord. And you have opportunities there to minister and hold out the gospel to people who need it. How about your neighbors? How about your friendships? How about your roommates? How about your hobbies? How about that grocery store run, I guess, to Costco today? Every ounce of your ordinary, like, you're already in these spheres, man. And God's calling you into purpose in the midst of those spheres, and you don't have to have a burning bush to tell you to do that. Jesus already did in the Great Commission. As you go make disciples. Everyday life infused with mission. Listen, it's no minor mission either, right? Like, this is important. Don't go looking today for a flashy, burning bush assignment if you're not being faithful in these primary ones already. Okay? Moses wasn't looking for that. He was just tending the sheep, man, in the wilderness. He was just doing his thing he's been doing for 40 years. He's being faithful in the little things. Now, what about other things? Maybe less general and more specific. Yeah, maybe God's called you to serve in a specific role in the church, or to step into a leadership responsibility, right? Or to use your spiritual gifts in more overt and bold ways and not hold back. Maybe today's about you acting on a certain idea or burden that God's been putting within you. You've been putting off. Advocating for a specific cause or completing a specific task, changing a specific habit. Maybe it's about obeying a clear command from God's word that you know is there, but you haven't been doing it. Then the Spirit's prompting you. Or you've been receiving clear godly counsel, but you're not acting on it. Maybe it's about evangelism to someone you know you're supposed to be being bold with. Like anything that you know you're supposed to be doing fits under this category, Jay. What is that? What is the thing that God has said, I've heard, I've seen, I've known, and I'm sending you now? Like, what is that? Number 2, what's our response? Objections or obedience? Okay. If you know what God's called you to, where are you arguing, objecting, resisting, procrastinating, excusing, right? What's keeping you from accepting his clear direction? Where are you avoiding the hard, if we can just put it that way? Maybe it's doubt and fear of the future, and those anxieties got you rolled up as you're playing the hypothetical scenarios game. Maybe you're thinking about how others will respond and it's paralyzing you, right? Maybe it's about your insufficiency, like Moses. Well, I just can't. I'm too this. I'm not enough that. I wish I was more this. In all the ways you discredit yourself, right? I'm too introverted. I'm too bold. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not wise enough. I don't know the Bible enough. I'm too anxious. I'm too broken and banged up in my past. Like, whatever it is, like, I can't. Like, is that your argument? If it is, here's how you argue that argument. You ready? You don't argue against it and start talking about how you really are sufficient. No. You embrace the insufficiency and you run straight to the cross with it. Okay, that's what Paul does in 2 Corinthians 12. God says, my grace is sufficient for you. My power will be made perfect in your weakness. And so he goes, okay, I'll boast all the more gladly then in my weakness. I'll embrace that. Same with 2 Corinthians 3, chapters earlier. What's our competency? Our competency is from the Lord. That's the confidence he says I have through Christ towards God. It's not that I'm sufficient in myself to claim as anything coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God. He's the one who's made me competent, Paul says. Ain't nothing in me, man. It's that he's with me. We embrace our insufficiency and we cling to his sufficiency. How about unwillingness? I don't want to. Are you hoping someone else is sent? I think overall, if we just ask today, where are you avoiding the hard? Okay. As the band comes back up, think about responding. Maybe like Moses, you're afraid of facing your past. You're afraid of failure, rejection. You're afraid maybe of this disrupting your life and what you've built, or you're afraid of conflict and that, But this is just all uncomfortable. You don't want to step out into it. There's that path, the path of Moses, that he showed us today of resistance and doubt and procrastinating fear and disobedience. Or there's a path that 1,500 years later, a teenage girl would take. She received a mission from God also. Not even God himself, it was an angel, and it was a much wilder mission, harder to accept, honestly, much crazier, and she didn't get flashy burning bush signs or big revelations of his name. There were no fireworks there, no snake tricks. And how did she respond? Let it be according to the Lord's word. I am his servant. Now, Mary was no doubt questioning inside her, just like Moses too, I'm sure. Like, how in the world is this going to happen, God? Is Joseph going to divorce me? How am I supposed to raise the Son of God? Who am I? She was overwhelmed. But she accepted it in simple faith. Oh, there's a deep joy, church, in joining God in his mission. Just saying, okay, I can't, but you can. You're going to have to go with me, Lord. And he says, I will. Because let's end on the final thing, is his answer, right? How's God answering your objections today? What is he speaking to you today about his sufficiency in the midst of your insufficiency? How's he quieting your anxieties with his presence? Hey, I'm with you. You may think, how am I ever going to be able to do this, God? And he goes, I'm with you. But what if I fail? He says, I'll stay with you. Well, what if this all falls to the ground and I lose everything? He says, you'll still have me. That's all you need. Walk through the valley of the shadow, church, you're not alone. The lion is padding by your side. I want you to take some time this week. Maybe you'll even do it right now as we're singing, to just put on a piece of paper. I want you to write down all the ways you feel insufficient, inadequate, all your weaknesses, and you just start to write them down. I'm too this, I'm not enough that, I can't this, I don't have enough that. I want you to write them all down. And then what I want you to do at some point, as you've kind of seen those, is you write back across them in big, giant, bold letters, I am with you. Just let the visual of that sink in. As we fix our eyes on his sufficiency, would you pray with me? God, thank you for your great promise. There is no greater promise. We confess today we're so much like Moses. Thank you for the encouragement found in these words as we squirm and excuse and object and resist and say, I can't, I shouldn't, what if? I won't. God, we know you're convicting us today. Maybe there's things you've been calling us to do for years, or even maybe just minutes that we've been avoiding what is hard. Would you show us today that the answer is found in you, your sufficient presence. Embolden us, Spirit of God, to accept your mission, to surrender and throw our hands up in our weakness and say, okay, Lord, if you're with me, that's all I need. We trust you, God, that you'll go with us. Charge us today, lead us today, empower us today to do the things that you are calling us to do. For the sake of your name and glory, we pray. Amen.